Hello class, today Connor, Ben, Ricardo and I are going to give a brief presentation on Book 4 of Plato's Republic. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the text, let us provide a roadmap of our presentation. We will follow chronologically the text on how Glaucon, Adimantus, and Socrates attack the various points of argumentation throughout the text. Here are the 7 points of inquiry we will look into.
So to start off here, we have the contextual information and scope. So first off, Socrates has presumably been talking about the components of an idyllic state, the overall purpose of the state analogy so as to seek out justice. Seeking out justice in state leads to seeking out justice in human person. And also, the Republic is primarily interested in Plato's theory of justice. So pretty much you have to remember that Socrates brings up the idea of the state because it's easier to find justice in the state than we can find justice in the human person.
Adimantus and Socrates begin Book 4 by continuing their discussion of the idyllic state. They bring up this idea of the idyllic state because in the idyllic state, there is this possibility for the discoverment, for the revealing of perfect justice. Therefore, the beginning of Book 4 is comprised of the characteristics of an idyllic state. Socrates and Adimantus examine the laws of a perfect state, its educational system, and its various classes and virtues. In particular, Socrates and Adimantus say some interesting things about wealth and poverty in the idyllic state. In the idyllic state, wealth and poverty are not existent. In wealth, there's a tendency for multiple classes to disregard their occupations and do things that do not concern them. In poverty, the working class do not have adequate material and adequate resources to carry out their jobs. Adimantus counters, however, that without wealth, the idyllic state will not be able to counter armies with excessive wealth. Socrates counters, though, saying that in the idyllic state, the warriors are not concerned with wealth, are not concerned with extraneous pleasures, and for that reason they dedicate all their time to seeking out the art of fighting. And for that reason, they can beat out an army of rich men who are not as dedicated. This brings up an interesting point because Socrates has perhaps already found this concept of justice at the beginning of the book. He hints out that justice is the proper ordering or the proper vocation of certain individuals, not doing things that they are not called to do. Socrates does not realize this until he is halfway through the book, but this is very interesting and certainly ironic.
What then is justice? Having sketched out the general shape of the city of the Guardians, its attitudes about happiness, unity, and law, Socrates and his companions return to the fundamental question, what is just and what is unjust? Where are justice and injustice to be found in the city of Guardians? Unsurprisingly, Socrates' method of pursuing this question is to proceed through a series of parallels and comparisons. He hopes to arrive at justice through a process of elimination. He begins by getting Glaucon to agree that the ideal city of the Guardians would be a good city. A good city, they agree, would also be a wise, courageous, moderate, and a just city. If we're able to figure out what makes a good city wise, courageous, and moderate, so they suppose, we will then be able to see what makes a good city just, if only by looking at what's left of its goodness. The wisdom of the city, they say, is to be found in the political or civic wisdom of the guardian class. The courage of the city is also to be found in the guardian class. It consists not just of military valor on the battlefield, but also the political courage to prevision the good opinions and what is lawful and what is terrible. The moderation of the city consists of the ordering and mastery of its desires and pleasures. It involves both the rulers and the ruled, since the ordering of the city involves the acknowledgement of this hierarchy of rule on both sides. And supposedly we are left with justice, see 433a. That rule we set down at the beginning as to what must be done in everything when we were founding the city, this or a certain form of it, in my opinion, is justice. Surely we set down and often said, if we remember, that each one must practice one of the functions of the city, that one for which his nature made him naturally most fit. Justice might consist mainly of the practice of minding one's own business. It is through this sense of justice that the other aspects of civic goodness, wisdom, courage, and moderation come to be, at least according to Socrates and Glaucon here. and it is through maintaining such justice that the preservation of the good city as a whole can be achieved. Injustice, then, would be undermine the preservation of the just order by meddling among the classes. This is unjust because it neglects the fact that the city can attain happiness as a whole if each class does its proper work. Guardians must be guardians, auxiliaries must be auxiliaries, and craftsmen must be craftsmen. Rulers should not try to make money, nor should moneymakers try to rule.
Adimantus and Glaucon have now discovered what justice is in the state. They have also discovered the various characteristics that make the idyllic state. However, they have arrived at a point of uncertainty. How can they compare the various characteristics and attributes of the state to that of an individual? Certainly, the two are not analogous. However, Socrates has 2 points of reasonings to elucidate this fact. First off, he states that when two things, a greater and less, are called by the same name, are they alike or unlike insofar as they are called the same? In this point of reasoning, Socrates is saying that the definitional basis for the term justice and for the various attributes and characteristics, such as temperance, fortitude, and knowledge, are essentially the same, regardless of the location they are found. However, Socrates sees that this reasoning is perhaps very shallow. Thus, he offers another theory called the theory of derivement, in which he states that in each of us, there are the same principles and habits which there are in the state, and that from the individual they pass into the state. How else can they come there? This is an excellent line of reasoning, because Socrates is saying that in order for the state to have certain qualities, certain characteristics, it would have to be of some certain origin or some certain place. And the state is a mere reflection or a mere unit of the various people that inhabit it. For that reason, the people that inhabit it reflect certain qualities, certain attributes onto the state as a whole. Here we can use a part to a whole to see that the parts and the characteristics of a certain parts therefore must apply to the certain characteristics of the whole. This is a brilliant analogy used by Socrates and sets up the rest of the argument. Socrates, Adimantus, and Glaucon have now discovered that the soul is comparable to the state. In this they find that the virtues of the state, temperance, valiance, and rationality, therefore must be found and comprised in the human soul. However, Socrates, Adimantus, and Glaucon arrive at a particular problem. Are there separate components in the soul for these various virtues, or are they of the same source? Socrates counters this question and targets this question with a singular line of reasoning. Can the same thing be at rest and in motion at the same time in the same part? Socrates claims that the answer to this question is no. He cites a particular example from the body. In the body, the desire for water can only be a singular desire, and that is for the relinquishing of thirst. It cannot tell not to drink, or to seek out food, or to seek out other various pleasures. It cannot do the opposite, nor can it seek out other extraneous wants. For that reason, Socrates assumes that within the soul, there must only be one component dedicated to each task. And for that reason, he assumes that there must be 3 different aspects of the soul: the rational, appetitive, and spirited. However, Glaucon makes a very clever counter-argument. He asks, can't the spirited part just be part of the appetitive part? They seem to be 2 fruits that are basically the same. However, Socrates counters that not necessarily, because the spirited part could very well go with the rational part. You could think of righteous anger or rational anger, like Jesus in the temple. And for that reason, Socrates says that we must keep the 3 components apart.
Plato's tripartite soul is a theory of the soul that divides the soul into 3 parts. These 3 parts being the appetitive, spirited, and rational parts of the soul. The appetitive part of the soul is attributed to all living things. All living things have appetites. Appetites include all things required to stay alive. All appetites and desires of the human person are in this category: hunger, thirst, sexual appetite, etc. And all living things, once again, are able to have appetites. Animals, grass, trees, even for water, soil, nutrients, stuff like that. The emotional part of the soul is attributed to sentient beings. So sentient beings have emotions. Animals have emotion. Your dog has emotion, for example. It's different than a plant. It's able to be sad, happy, hungry, angry, things like that. The emotional part of the soul mainly involves the choice of motion, that being the ability to move around. And then the rational part of the soul is unique to humans. We're able to rationalize, we're able to logically think, it's unique to humans. Where's Plato going with all this? Well, he's trying to show us that in order to live a true human life, we must live rationally. That if we feed too much into our appetites, like lust and greed, we essentially become a plant. And if we feed into our emotional, which is attributed to honor and status, we become angry and envious of other people. But if we live a rational life, we truly live the human life.
The state and the human person have three distinct parts, as Ben has just explained. Right? And in a similar regard, as Connor explained earlier, in the state, justice is this correct harmonizing within the state. The worker class does not interfere with the warriors or with the guardians of the state. In that same regard, those appetitive, the desires for water, for food, for pleasure, for sexual gratification is not going to be ordering the rational part around. Right? The rational, the appetitive, and the spirited part all have their own place within the soul. The correct unity, the correct harmonizing within the soul is therefore justice, according to Socrates and to Plato. And similar to in the state, when the worker class starts to do the job of the warriors or the jobs of the guardians, as in democracy, that's an interesting point, maybe he talks about that later. Then we have disharmony, we have injustice. Socrates brings up this analogy of the sick man, of a sickness. It's like a cancer that comes about to the body when body functions do things that they should not be doing. Right? If the soul does things, if parts of the soul, if the appetitive part is doing something that it should not be doing, then injustice, then the cancer of the soul is going to come about. Thus, Socrates says we found justice in the soul. We found what it means to be a just human person. However, is it more profitable to be just or unjust? And the answer seems pretty self-explanatory, because we just said, well, injustice seems like this cancer. But Socrates says, no, we need to hold on. And that's how he concludes the book. And presumably, book 5, 6, 7, and the rest of the books deal with this question of profitability with justice and injustice. Hey guys, this is Dom here again. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. You got something out of it. We enjoyed making it for you guys. Anyways, before we leave you, before you exit the video, we kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some discussion points, some points of interest before you go. In particular, there's those first three questions. Those are things you can take a look at. The difference between temperance and justice, they maybe seem synonymous to some. It seems synonymous to me at the beginning, right? And then Socrates' indictment of only 4 virtues, right? Why aren't there more than 4? Is he oversimplifying? And you see the third question as well. But I think I want to talk a little bit more about this fourth point, right? The overall arching thematic significance of this book is justice, right? He actually dives into it right here and defines it, right? So is Socrates' definition of justice correct? Is the way he portrays it the way that it is? And I think it's something that you guys can think about, you guys can meditate a little bit about, and I'll give a little bit about my groups, right, and my opinion on the matter. And I think right, Plato definitely has the overarching idea of what this concept of justice is, right? Nitty-gritty wise, it may not necessarily be three parts of the soul as he defines it, right? This appetitive, the spirited part, this rational part. It may not actually exist about that. But I think he does have a good point in saying that justice is this harmony or this unity within the soul, right? Who knows how it is? Who knows how it's organized, right? But it is this harmony or justice, right, in that everything is functioning properly. There's no disorderliness within the soul. How that plays out, how that looks, Socrates, Plato may be correct. Or it kind of may be this Christian idea with there's a singular conscience within the soul that mitigates everything. And then there's different aspects of the conscience, right? Concupiscence, right? And free will, the interplay, right? And the correct ornament of that could be justice, right? But I think at the end of the day, Socrates is pointing to a truth and to some kind of consensus. But once again, it's up for you guys to think about, for the class to think about. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. I hope you got something out of it. Thanks, guys.